Aqua Dubai. That's a very good clone of a very expensive Louis Vuitton fragrance called Imagination. Save yourself the money, man. Get Aqua Dubai. It's out of the Amber Oud line from Al Haramain. Let's go for a ride. Nothing quite like the sounds of a motorcycle engine at 6:30 in the morning. My name is Josh. This is Rides and Reflections, where we ride and reflect. And today I'm reflecting on why I have a hair in my mouth. I can't get it out. Got gloves on. Full face helmet on. I'm stuck with it. Last episode, we talked about Soren Kierkegaard and his philosophy of existence and how it's important to define your own values and live faithfully by those values. Subjective truths are more important to defining your life than objective truths. An objective truth like what year Caesar crossed the Rubicon or how many miles is it to the moon, you won't live or die for that, but you will die for something. Which convictions really define you? It won't be stuff like that. Anyhow, check that out, Soren Kierkegaard. What do you guys think about when you ride? Let's say you have a long commute or just a decent enough weekend ride to reflect. What is it you think about? Does everybody have an inner monologue where you talk to yourself, you think about stuff that's important? Anything. You think about solving problems. Not a worry session or anything like that. I think we all have concerns we have to sort out, and that requires mental compute. But when you're just relaxing and you have no agenda, what does your mind turn to? Let me know. It's probably just best to think about nothing. Just take it in. Smell the air and feel the temperatures and listen to the sounds and enjoy the adventurous, risky, very palpable sensation of riding a motorcycle. Have you ever, let me ask you if you relate to this. Are there special routes from your childhood or yesterday, your previous job 5-10 years ago, previous home, I don't know, some place that you traversed frequently, but you haven't done it in a long time, and you certainly have not done it on a motorcycle? Do you have a desire to go make those routes again, this time on a bike? Because it's a different vibe. There's almost no vibe, but I don't know, nostalgia or looking back, or when you're in a car, it's automatic, it's cruise control. But it's different when you're on the bike. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because you can reach down and touch the actual street with your feet, and you can feel the air and all that you don't have in a car. You're protected. You're kind of cheating. I just find there's a deeper connection to geography when you're feeling that air on your body, and you can smell, you can hear all these sounds unimpeded by the box of the car that you're inside. I think of my first childhood home. I really don't want to go back to this. This neighborhood's not great. I don't know if I would make it out of there. But I have been buying a car, and you get to see your old house and the streets where your dad taught you to ride a bicycle and all that. But to actually feel it, man, on the bike would be fun. I don't know why I lurched right there, but that probably was stupid looking. Looking back and creating meaning through the previous chapters of my life and integrating them into the present and thinking about the future. As I mentioned yesterday, I really enjoy it. I create meaning that way. It's very, not only therapeutic, but it's healthy, it's positive, it's not negative. I know people that get stuck in the past, and I like to move forward, and I like to use the past to recharge my battery and to move forward. That's how I approach it. For other people, and I don't relate to this, but I appreciate it and understand it because people are different. I've talked to some people where you start talking about the past, and some of it's painful. But even the painful stuff for me is, I'm telling you, I really don't mind. It's like a new territory I get to traverse and explore. Whereas some people, they just like to contain that. They acknowledge it, but they contain it. I may have talked about this in a previous episode, where it's like a house. Your life is a house with many different hallways and rooms. And there are some rooms where you just want the door shut. You acknowledge that it wouldn't be the house without that room, but we don't go in there because the room may flood. That's a containment method, I guess, and I appreciate it. I'm not like that. I don't become destabilized when I revisit. I create meaning by revisiting. So, that's the first thing I wanted to talk about today, I guess. One author and philosopher that's been impactful in my life is Friedrich Nietzsche. I was raised an evangelical Christian, and reading someone who said things like God is dead that's not on the reading list. But as I became a mature man and able to handle differences in opinion, and I was able to glean quite a bit from a man who was clearly not a Christian. He does make it. He's not ambiguous about that, but he has respect for Christ. In fact, he has a lot of respect for Christ, but not the institution of Christianity, which he thinks is more Pauline than Christian. Anyhow, that's not why I read Nietzsche. I read Nietzsche for other reasons. And I want to ask two questions about Nietzsche. Why do you think it is? Well, actually, I'm just going to tell you. I'm going to tell you one thing, then ask you a question. Nietzsche was trying to navigate the death of God through the evolution discoveries of Darwin and such. He saw the social fabric of a people and a culture and a world, the Christian world, the European world, as potentially coming unraveled by this existential crisis when your foundation is rug pulled through Darwin's discoveries and other scientific discoveries. Nietzsche was not saying, I hate God, I'm killing him. He was recognizing what was happening, and he was saying, how can we navigate this? How can we make sense of the world and still have meaning in the world without resorting to ideals? That was really what Nietzsche did. So, another misconception is that he was a nihilist. There's passive nihilism and active nihilism. He may have been a passive nihilism or an indicative. He was saying that what we have now with this erosion of our social morals and religious foundation in this death of God is a kind of recognition of nihilism in the sense that there is no grand divine meaning. But he was not prescribing a lifestyle that was nihilistic, which would be active nihilism or prescriptive, what I call prescriptive nihilism. He was more of a indicative nihilist. It is the case that you can't resort, he believed, to God to hold your world together. What do we do now? If all we have is science, and science tells us that things are pretty meaningless. Which symbols will you have? You know, Carl Jung talked about Nietzsche, his big problem and why he went mad. I disagree with this. Is because he lost his symbol. He was a preacher's kid, Nietzsche, and he abandoned his Protestant faith. And you have to have a symbol, what Jung called a symbol, something to live for, something bigger than you, something that ties your reality together and gives you purpose and meaning. It could be Christianity, it could be a different religion, it could be your patriotic spirit. And when Nietzsche abandoned his symbol, he did not replace it with anything, and so he fell apart. He disintegrated. I don't agree with that. Anyhow, the other question I was going to ask you is, what do you think Nietzsche meant by declaring himself the first psychologist? I really feel tempted to tell you what I think about it, but this is a pretty bold claim. He's certainly not saying I'm the first psychologist with a clinical lab. That wasn't what he was doing. But if you do know his philosophy style, he was kind of psychoanalyzing established philosophy of the day and established religion, and he would kind of pull back the mask. And in that sense, I'll just leave it there. I think that's what he's doing. Nietzsche declared himself the first psychologist in his autobiographical work toward the end of his life, the end of his sane life, called Ecce Homo. And he wrote a lot of flamboyant things and said some things about himself that seemed very haughty and arrogant and like borderline megalomania, if not megalomania. And that was one of the things he said. I think he wrote in a way to get a rise out of people. I hear he was a very kind man, very generous man. He lived by principles for sure. He was very disciplined. So I think Christians should be careful when they dismiss a writer because of something they heard somebody say about him. This guy said God is dead, so we can't read him, much less understand what he meant by that. What I think is one of the brilliant insights of Nietzsche is that think of the truth discoverers, the people who are trying to discover truth, and say that the reason they believe things is because it's true, and that they've used reason and their rational consciousness to arrive at these conclusions. I have discovered truth. I'm an objective truth seeker. Nietzsche said, not really. That's how it feels, and that's how it seems. But perhaps, well, he didn't say perhaps. He was pretty certain that what's going on is there's some kind of deeper, inner, instinctive forces at work here. He would call this the will to power. But it's not objective truth seeking and using your rational mind. There's something at play that's beneath that. You believe what you need to believe. You do what you need to do. It's psychology. A lot of it has to do with creating ideals that take the effective edge off of the tragedy of life. That was the genius of Nietzsche. Now, you can decide for yourself whether and where that's true in your life and other people's lives, but something to think about. Do we later backfill with truth arguments? Big worldview changes come, I think, from pain. It hurts. So I need something to help. And then later we backfill and say, oh, that was all just truth-seeking and arguments and logic. Going back to the discussion of Kierkegaard yesterday with love and falling in love and how wonderful it is to fall in love. Did you really fall in love with that person because you did all the truth tables and the Venn diagrams and the syllogisms, and you laid out the pictures of all these suitors or interests and their biographies, and you created a spreadsheet, and you spread out the receipts, and you just made a good old rational calculation. I've got to fall in love with where the math checks out. You may later say, man, she was the best choice. There was another person I was interested in, and so there was some logic. I'm not saying that it's irrational and illogical, but I think it's extra logical and extra rational, and really has very little to do with calculations and all that. You just fall. People fall, and it makes the world go round. What would this life be without love and falling in love? And if that itself is not objective truth-seeking and rational and reasonable, then what does that mean? It would actually be insulting to my wife if I told her that I fell in love with her because of that process I did. I robotically determined that she was the best probability of a long-term happy relationship. One of many. I chose you. That's what the data showed, so I just went with the data. Something else was at work, man. A drive, a human drive, deeper than consciousness. That's a show of its own right there, is the limbic system versus the frontal lobe. What do you think a baseball player does when he's up there facing a major league hitter looking for a fastball or a curveball? How much computing is he doing? Or is he not using something more basic? Instincts. You've got a split second. Like muscle memory. What's muscle memory? It's just something takes over sometimes, guys. It's not always your brain. That would be a boring life if you were always using your frontal lobe. I think another observation that Nietzsche made, and he may have been quite ahead of his time on this one. This may be out there for some of you, but I think he was talking about cause and effect. And the example he was talking about was somebody who's in shape and lean and has a nice figure because they eat well, they diet. So the diet is the cause, and then the healthy body is the effect. He says, well, maybe it's the other way around. Maybe we have it wrong about cause and effect. That's the way things seem, is that effects follow causes by necessity. But maybe you work out and eat well because of your biology, of who you are. You're a healthy specimen. Your lifeline is ascending, and you're going to do things that people with ascending lifelines do. It's certainly interesting to think about that. I mean, you could, of course, you could say, no, I was fat until I did this diet, and now I'm thin. Well, why did you choose the diet? Why did someone else not choose that diet? Why you? Why you? Why did you make that choice? Maybe it's something else in you. Maybe you were born to be thin. Maybe you're a healthy person of essence. And healthy people end up doing healthy things. Healthy people end up looking healthy and feeling healthy. Just like, intelligence, when they've done twin studies that show you take two twins that are the same, identical, and one grows up in poverty, one in affluence, but they're both of high stock, IQ-wise. How do they end up? The same. Smart people end up doing smart things, guys. And you can point to all the different choices that one twin made who grew up in poverty that made him successful, but there's something else at play. The reason I mentioned that he could have been way ahead of his time, and this could be a little bit far out for some, is that I've Listen to this other PhD anthropologist and psychologist who talks about precognition and time loops and how the future may be influencing the present as much as the past. Wild. And he uses block universe physics. He tries to ground it in science. He's not trying to ground it in feeling. And he's a researcher, a PhD trained researcher who understands primary sources and peer review and critical thinking and being dispassionate. I like to gain insights from those guys rather than the true kooks who seem like they're trying to hold on to something as a hobby, or like Nietzsche said, to take the edge off of suffering. I need to believe this, so I'm going to defend it. I'm not saying I believe in precognition or time loops, but it's one of those fields of parapsychology that's worth exploring. Do you believe what's true, or do you believe what you need to believe, and you later were able to cleverly demonstrate that this is the truth? I'm going to sign off for today, guys. Thanks for riding along. Beautiful Brown County and Nashville, Indiana. Okay, let's listen to the soothing sounds of a 298cc parallel twin Kawasaki versus engine.